Since it's 4:59 p.m. and we have a 5 o'clock meeting, I'd like to call this Water and Sewer Board meeting for Tuesday, July 14th to order. And I need approval of minutes for June 9th of 2020. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes from June 9th? Since I hear none, I need a motion for approval of the minutes. Does somebody wish to do it? Who's that?
I move for approval.
All right, second.
I second.
Okay, got a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right, at this point, we will recognize Francisco Martinez as a new member of the board, and thank you for applying and getting appointed and coming to these meetings. So we have an alternate. I'm not sure how I pronounce his first name. Drevvis Ridley?
Correct. Drevvis Ridley, correct.
All right, is he here?
She is.
Oh, she is. I stand corrected. I thought that's the young lady seated on the couch there.
That's right.
Okay, welcome aboard too. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
being here. Okay. At this point, is there anybody, we go to public forum. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to make comment to this Sewer and Water Board?
Chairman Clyde,
Yes, ma'am.
I think you didn't take the attendance. We need to do roll call.
Right, I see them all here. So, okay, we'll go by the order of attendance here. We'll start with Mr. Hobnick. Would you sign in by your voice call, sir?
I am signed in.
Okay, Mr. Moore.
I'm here, thank you.
Mayor Olson.
Here.
Miss Ridley.
Here.
Mr. Martinez.
Present.
Caitlin. Caitlin? Caitlin.
Present, sorry.
All right, that's all of the members that we have present at this time.
Member Wink is
And
here.
Mrs. Wink. Cheryl Wink.
And Dawn is here too.
And is Joanne? Oh, there's John Roth. Mr. Roth, would you sign in with voice acknowledgement, please? Have you got your sound on, John? There he's in the picture, but I don't know if his voice is in there.
Don?
Don?
It's connecting to the audio, I think.
Okay, there we go. Don, you want to identify yourself?
Okay, I just got my audio on. So, yeah, Don Roth.
Okay, now the only last one is Joe Anderson.
I don't believe Joe is on.
Beg your pardon?
I don't believe Joe is on, but member Wink hasn't responded to you either.
Neither, yeah, I know Cheryl hasn't either.
You need to turn your mic on, Cheryl.
I just texted her as well, but okay, I think you just have to assume she isn't here.
Well, we'll go with that then at this time. Again, back to item number 5 on the agenda, public forum. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak to this board?
So excuse me, Chair, point of information. Joe Anderson is watching and doesn't seem to be able to come in. So I'm wondering if he hasn't been made a panelist. Can you, Jay, do you know?
Let me check right now and see.
It looks like there's a Pieter too.
Yes, Peter is trying to get in. Okay, let me. There they are.
Joe is going to try a different link.
I'm going to move Joe to panelist right now.
Oh no, he was he's trying another link.
Oh, okay.
Well, keep an eye out for him.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Yes. Okay. I think everyone is in.
Well, we
now.
got Joe there and we got Peter there.
Yes.
All right, I'm here. Thanks.
Okay, Joe, thank you very much. Well, apparently we have nobody from the public forum at this time.
Member Wink has also entered, and so has Peter Van Rye.
Ah, there's Cheryl. Hello, Cheryl.
Hello, sorry, I was stuck in another meeting. Here I am.
Okay, very good. We'll move to new business. And I think Angela Goodman has an introduction.
Yeah, so I'd like to start today by introducing Angela Goodman, who is our new Deputy Director of Operations and Maintenance for Utilities. She started last Monday and comes to us from Aurora, and we're very excited to have her. So I'll let Angela speak for a couple minutes and introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. So I'm very excited to be on board. Like Peter said, I've been here for a little over a week now, and I'm learning a ton, trying to get to meet folks and get out to see some of the facilities and whatnot. At Aurora Water, I managed our source water group, which is all of the raw water facilities for the reservoirs, the dams, the big pipes, and raw water pump stations, that kind of stuff. Before that, I was a consulting engineer where I kind of specialized in pipelines. So I've been working in the water industry for over 20 years. And like I said, I'm excited to be on board, so thank you.
Glad to have you here. All right, I have one question I would like to ask you, Peter, on discussion about topping off or filling McClellan Reservoir. What's the status there?
Yeah, so got the question, and essentially there's a couple things going on. So right now we store about 2,000 acre feet in McClellan Reservoir, the city of Englewood does, and we're about 170 acre feet under that. So we're almost topped off. The reason the reservoir is lower than it looks is because Centennial has the other essentially 2/3, so about 4,000 acre, just under 4,000 acre feet that they store water and that they use for their system. And they're around, I think it's 1,400 acre feet under what their max is. And so the total pool itself is going to be lower, but it's not a situation where we can put more water in to make it go up because it's largely due to Centennial. I will also add to that earlier this year we had a challenge topping off the reservoir because if you recall, I had talked about through the master planning process that we actually had some pumps that went down in the pump station that pumps to McClellan. And so all spring we've been down our full capacity from a pumping perspective. So we were never actually able to top it off this year because once we repaired a pump, another one broke. And so then we had to go and repair that one. As I understand it, I talked to Dave today. He said the last pump actually went in today of those pumps that needed to be repaired. So we should be back to full again, although we do have another pump that tends to go through seals pretty quickly that we're monitoring as well. So the combination of those two things is why the reservoir is where it's at.
Okay, if somebody in the general public asks about it, can we give them an idea in the future, later this year or next year? You want to fill it up or not?
Yeah, our goal is to top it off, and so from a water, it all depends on water availability, and so right now the estimates would be anywhere from 4 to 8 months to get it topped back, the entire reservoir topped back off, right. Because we have to get through this hot period right now where everybody's got their sprinkler systems on, where we're drawing down the reservoir,
right,
and then get to the point where we have runoff again that we can slowly fill the reservoir back up again.
Well, very good, thank you.
Yeah.
And have you made arrangements for members of the board to get on a boat of some kind and go out and do a little fishing, or is that still on the hold? Or
I didn't know there was a request to go fishing, but we might be able to get you on a boat. I can look at it.
There's some bodacious fish in there. Just kidding. Okay, back to you, Peter, on old business. I guess you want to give us a progress report on the rate study?
I do, and if you're noticing my background, it's because I'm at my parents' house in upstate New York. So I'm coming in remotely from upstate New York, and and they have old wallpaper. So that's what that's what you're looking at.
Would never notice that. You don't have an accent, a New York accent there.
Yeah, way upstate. So ours is a little more like Minnesota than it is Brooklyn.
Okay.
But so I'd also like, so I'm going to actually share my screen here. And this is the second round of the second update on the progress on the rates and fees study. And I have Carol Molesky and Siwan Rao are on as well. They're with Stantec. You've met them before. And so they'll be helping along with this presentation, and we'll get right into it. And let me, oh shoot, hold on, let me get the share screen. And there we go. And then from beginning. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so this is what we're going to cover tonight. Let me move my little window box here. So we're going to talk a lot about connection fees. And so last time we talked a lot about rates. This time we're going to start talking about connection fees. Then we'll go into miscellaneous fees. Those are the miscellaneous charges that we charge, like a shut-off fee or things like that. We're going to go through some additional, we're going to go back to the financial plan and talk about some other scenarios that we looked at to provide some additional options and ideas on how to plan forward. And then we'll go into rate design and billing and the cost of service. COS is cost of service. And then a customer assistance program that we're looking into, and then next steps. So here's where we're at. You can see the things that have been completed and are in progress. The completed things are the financial plan and the rate survey. Everything else is right now really in progress, and this is the meat of what we're trying to put together so that we can have a good set of defendable rates and fees for the fall. We'll talk about connection fees. So if this is a slide that I showed you last time. So a connection fee is basically the existing system, the system value divided by the number of SFEs equals a connection fee. And so that's the amount that each unit, the new unit that comes onto the system, needs to pay to have access to the system. And so that's paying their fair share of the investment that was made by the previous citizens and homeowners and businesses of the city of Englewood. There's three general methodologies. There's the buy-in method. So that's where you have a lot of existing capacity and each unit is buying into that overbuilt capacity. There's an incremental method, which is essentially when as new growth occurs. So a lot of those communities to the south that are largely growth based, that's a significant part of their methodology is based on incremental method. But then there's also a combined method, which is where you look at existing capacity in combination with new growth requirements, and then that's how we establish the fee. These are, by the way, these are all industry standard methodologies that have been developed over the years and are defendable and are defendable in the state of Colorado. And so what we do is we look at, we have to figure out what the value of our system is. And so essentially there's four different ways that we do that. There's the original cost, which is essentially the cost when it was purchased. Net book value, which is the original cost less accumulated depreciation. Replacement cost new, which that means if we wanted to just replace everything brand new in $2020, that would be that cost. And then replacement cost new less depreciation, which is one that takes that new version and then but accounts for the fact that some of the system is essentially used and not brand new. And so as an example, the RCNLD, which is a replacement cost new less depreciation, you can see here the net system water resources value. So that's all of our water rights, and our system in the mountains is worth $581 million. The water system itself is worth about $61 million. The sewer collection is just over $4 million, and the sewer treatment is essentially about $233 million. And so that's basically the value less the depreciation that would have occurred for the assets based on their age. And then you can see we have calculated capacity levels for each one of those, a level of service per individual unit, so SFE, so gallons per day, And then that results in equivalent SFEs. So that's the SFEs that are equivalent for that system investment. All of that calculates, and there's a lot of sophisticated calculation that goes behind this, but essentially breaks down to a calculated fee per SFE of $17,500 for the water resources. Water system is $1,400, sewer collection is $400, and sewer treatment is about just under $2,000. And so there's 4 valuation methods like we talked about, and this is really the meat of what I want the board to take away, is that we have an option of how we want to assess this fee based on defendable methodology. And you can see the 4 have a varying degree between the low of 19,500 and a high of 28,345. Our existing fee, just for comparison, is $69.60. The vast majority of what we're not collecting for today is that access to that highly valuable water resources system in the mountains and that raw water supply. So those water rights and the raw water system are highly valuable, and we can't determine that we're really charging new customers the cost it would require to invest in that system, to become part of that system. But you can see here that we've got 4 different methodologies that are generally in that $20,000 range, and then the one that's $28,000. And so essentially what we want to do with this is we want to stay with the same method. So we don't want to do one method for water and then a different method for sewer. We want to stay with the same method no matter what. We are leaning towards RCNLD because it reflects the cost of the original investment and then accounts for that depreciation amount, which basically accounts for the fact that it's used. The RCNLD is also commonly used on the Front Range, so it's not like it's not like this new method that doesn't have a tried and true methodology used across Front Range. We would also recommend to actually split the water fee into a water resources and water system fees so that people can see what the difference is, because that's where the substantial amount of increase is in the water fee, and it's largely due to that access into that water resources system. And then ultimately, like with any of these types of fees, we want to review them every so many years, every 5 years, so that make sure that we're still, we're still accurate in our fees. And so this is where it would put us. So you can see on the bottom, that's where we were. So our total fee was $69.60. This proposed fee would put us, and this is the RCNLD, would put us in 4th place, basically. So we'd be just under Boulder, but we'd be more than Denver Water, inside the city, Longmont, and Littleton. So, but we'd still be on the lower end. And the thing that you can see that's different there is that $17,500 in the middle. That's that water resources fee that we don't really charge for right now. So I'm going to stop there and see if there's any questions initially on connection fees. Or we can do questions at the end.
Well, I don't hear any so far. Let's go ahead.
All right.
I'm sorry. This is John. I'll ask a quick one.
Sure.
How do you clarify for me? I assume these are new connections, so new construction in the city, or actually within not just the city, but in the service district, right?
No, so the total fee would be within the city. Yeah, would be within the city.
And then how does it work between, how would you put something in, like timing wise, reflecting that someone may have already started construction, say, or planning for it? So how much lead time would you give before instituting a substantial jump like this for developers?
Well, so typically the time that you pay the fee is at the time of permit. Mm-hmm. So if you haven't pulled a permit yet, then in theory you would be subject to whatever the fee changes are at the time that they're implemented. We haven't discussed a phased in implementation of projects that are progressing along the way. That's something that we could look at if we needed to.
And teach a class to the entire class using Zoom, but then the faculty member might come to campus.
Well, we got a different Zoom.
That wasn't me.
There was some code words in there that sounded like it, but no.
It was not me.
Peter, but I assume in terms of the process of actually announcing this change, so there would also be lead time in that respect. So anyone that's close to permitting would be able to presumably have time to get in and get it done without getting a sudden shock.
Yeah, we could. I think the challenge is those people. So if you look at the fees are not unreasonable in the Front Range. So if you're a developer or you're building in the Front Range, we're still on the low end actually. And so if we were to allow people to get in before these fees went into effect, then they'd essentially be getting in for a deal and not paying for their fair share access to the system. Now I understand we want to give people time to adjust to it. But I don't, if it's a developer that does work anywhere in the Front Range, these aren't going to look out of whack, if that makes sense.
And I think you said the key thing too. If it's permitting, it's not the day you're connecting, but by the time someone started the project and got their permits, that's where they've already planned things out or whatever. So that sounds like a reasonable spot as opposed to the connection date.
Yeah, it's at the time they pull permit. So if they pull permit and they're in under construction, then they would have paid the fees at the time of permit. That's my understanding of it.
All right, very good. Thank you.
I also have to say that this is the most common complaint we get from people, both on council and others that are watching this, to say that we are not charging developers what they should be charged and that we're losing funds, and we've been doing this for a very, very long time, and that it's been a neglect of the city. So I think this is writing it in a way that we just need to do it.
Very good.
So then that, just to clarify, since I'm new to all this, this is for all new building?
That's correct. It's new building.
Okay.
So for example, something that Englewood sees a lot of is a house gets scraped and then the duplex goes up. And so what would happen in that situation is the existing connection they would get credit for the existing connection, and then the second connection that they would connect to would have to pay these new fees.
So it wouldn't apply to a house that's renovating?
No.
I mean, okay.
In theory, if you took a house and you scraped it and you put just another single family house on top of the lot, you wouldn't pay any more. If you kept the same size service connection, you wouldn't pay any more because you've already got the investment in the system.
Okay. That sounds great.
Okay, miscellaneous fees. So these are, so what we did is we reviewed these fees. So these are somewhat labor intensive fees. So this is water shut off, delinquent charges, inspections, those kinds of things. We're in the process of working through that right now. They're not substantial revenue sources. However, we want to get them on a firm foundation with a rationale that is defendable. And so Stantec has been working with utility staff to understand the tasks that we're performing, the amount of labor and vehicles that are involved, and then compare that with the existing fees. From the information that I've talked to Stantec about, there's a number of these that look like we might actually be slightly overcharging on. And so if anything, we'll make those adjustments. There's a couple that it seems like we're undercharging on. At the end, we're going to make a recommendation that's based on here's what the actual work amount is, or here's what the labor requirements are and the resources that are required, and then make the fees such that we're collecting for the effort to effort required under the fee. So those are coming. Let's switch gears to financial plan update. And so if you recall, we went over this, the FAMS model last meeting and came up with a number of scenarios that we talked through. This is the water fund. This is the one we landed on with the water fund a while back. And if you remember, it's a dynamic model. We have the ability to go through and make a number of changes based on changing the CIP or changing how much our revenue requirements are and things like that. So we wanted to talk about some of the planning objectives that we didn't really talk about last time, but I wanted to just make sure that that we touched on them to understand where we're focusing our efforts and how we guide this guide where we ultimately land. So reserve fund balance is one of the things that we look at. So what we want to do is we want to get to a point where we get to 3 months of O&M operating and maintenance expenditures as a reserve. So that way, if everything collapses, we have at least 3 months in the bank that we could just continue to operate the system while we're trying to figure out what we're going to do. That's, I mean, you would expect that to happen in some kind of a major catastrophe or something like that. Right now, we do not have a target. And so the plan is to slowly build to a target where we end up establishing that reserve fund and we don't touch it. Debt service coverage requirements. Our senior debt, we look for a 1.1 times factor for debt service coverage. So that's the payment we have to make in debt. We want to make sure that we're accounting for at least 1.1 times that amount that is put away and is always there, so that we ensure that no matter what, we're always paying our debt. We also look at the total water and sewer bill impacts for typical residential customers. That's a lot of what we talked about last time, and we're going to talk a little bit more again here. And then another one is because we have a lot of capital needs over the next several years based on the results of the master plan, we look at we have to look at debt, but we want to look at debt in a smart way. And so there's the Fitch rating agency has these metrics for all types of for financial metrics that are used to measure the financial viability of an organization. And the one that we pulled out for this one is the CIP debt finance. And you can see this is from the 2019 Fitch rating category. And a AAA has a 29%, a maximum of a 29% debt amount. A AA has a maximum of 37%, and a single A has a 44%. Right now, I believe we're AA as a utility and as a city. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to balance the needs that we have to get accomplished, the revenue requirements that we impose on customers from a rate and fee or a rate increase perspective, with an amount of debt that doesn't get us so wildly out of whack that we lose our rating category. And because if we go lower in rating, then debt, when we issue debt, it costs us more. And so if we have a higher rating, money is cheaper basically. So these are some of the things that we look at. And so in the water financial plan, this is what we talked about last time. And I think one of the things to remember on this plan as a whole is this is it's intended to be a dynamic process. So what we're talking about today and the plan that we're looking at in the next 10 years could change based on new information next year. And we have the model to be able to make those adjustments based on that new information. And so we look to plan it out 10 years, but we also don't lock ourselves into that for the next 10 years because information changes every year. So the thing that we want to do is we want to be constantly looking at this and updating it and making sure that our needs are being met from a capital and an operations perspective, but we're also not overcharging or undercharging or getting ourselves in the similar kind of hole that we find ourselves in today. So it is a dynamic process that as an organization, we'll be talking to not just this board, but the council on a much more frequent basis as we continue to operate this base or optimize this base model. This is what that optimized scenario that we talked about last month looked like. You can see the two charts that I wanted to focus on are in the upper right corner, which is this one, and this is basically operations, maintenance cost, debt, and the total amount. And so the concern on this one is, if you can see, the debt continues to increase. So that debt amount keeps getting larger as the years go out. And what we try to do is we try to get that flattened. And then if you look down here in this middle lower chart, you can see the amount that's funded by cash is in green. And then it gets to the point where there's less cash and more debt. And then ultimately you get out to 28 and 29, and the capital is largely funded by debt. And so that's some of the optimization that we went back after the last time we met to really start to look at, well, how can we help maybe mitigate that type of issue into the future? And so we looked at was another optimized scenario where we kept everything the same for next year, and then but we accounted for an increase in the capital fee. So you can see this line right here of $1 every couple years. So every 2 years we increase it $1. And so the results of that one, you can see we're getting better on here from a cash debt perspective, although we still have a significant amount of debt. This is still increasing to some degree, and so it's still growing as opposed to flattening. And so we looked at what if we went with a $15 capital improvement fee and a $1 increase every 2 years. And you can see there it's 15, then it goes to 16, 17, 18, 19. And if you recall that Fitch debt number that I talked about, that's this number in the right hand corner here. So 45.9%. So we're still a little high. And so but that's at the end of 10 years. So that gives us time to actually fix that. I guess that is the key on that. But looking out 10 years, if we know we're trending towards something where we're gonna exceed what those Fitch ratings are, then we might want to look at ways to optimize our capital plan or ways to change the revenue. But essentially what you can see on this one is we start to get a much better blend of cash versus debt here. And you can really see that 27 and 28 are the times when we issue a lot of debt. And so what we can actually do is we can look out into 27 and 28, and we can smooth that capital plan out a little bit more to help mitigate the effect of 28 and 29 and see what those expenses are and try and fix that. I think if you look at this upper right-hand corner as well, you can see that as you get out to 28 and 29, the red line and the blue line start to become parallel. So that's what we want to get to, is we want to get to a point where it's either parallel or it's declining slightly or it's going up slightly, but it's staying generally as a trend such that it's not exceeding that Fitch percent that we're trying to stay in target with. And so that's a lot of information, but that's the power of the tool and some of what we've gone back and looked at relative to how we can further optimize this water financial plan in a way that looks at an increased amount over what we talked about last month to try and look at some of those other factors as well. So on the sewer scenario side, the sewer scenario, we think we've got pretty well dialed in, such that if you remember the rate increases, so for 2021 is 4.5%, then it goes to 4.25 and then 4, and then down to 3, and we can keep it at generally around 3 all the way out to 2030. If you see these yellow lines here, that senior lien coverage amount, if you remember, it's 1.1 times. So as you get to 1.13, we're getting really close to that target that we're looking for. It substantially goes up in 2026 because we actually retire some debt in 2021. So that's why it goes up to 2.4. So 2025 on the sewer fund perspective is actually a good spot because we retire a significant debt burden that we have. And then I think the other thing that we're gonna go back and after we're done with all this and continue to work with the model and have Stantec take a look at some additional scenarios is I want to look out 20 years, because my concern is we get the end of 30 years and we're not accounting for some major capital investment that needs to occur 15 or 18 years from now. And what I don't want to do is I don't want to get in a place where we're not planning for it well into the future. So the next step is to look out 20 years. Sewer fund, if you look at the expenses by type, we're pretty parallel here. We're actually a good blend. And actually this is where, again, you can see where the debt retires in 26 and we're cash funding a lot more than we were in the next 4 years. So this is what we talked about a month ago for rate comparison at the $12 capital investment fee, we'd be at 60.63. If we went with a $15 one, it goes up just over $3. And you can see we're still second lowest by a lot. But it definitely gives some options to think about in terms of how to even further set us up in the long run financially. Okay, so any questions on that? Or we can hold them to the end, because I got a couple other things I'll go through and then we can cover them at the end.
Peter,
Okay.
I've had my hand up. Nobody's calling on me, so I'm just
sorry.
gonna speak. Yeah, that's okay. You're busy. So what you said about looking out to forecast 20 years from now and beyond is precisely what I had in mind when I reached out the other day. In terms of my wondering if these fee increase modeling scenarios we've looked at are taking into account just where the city might be down the line. Like, mathematically, it almost seems to me that we may need to absorb a tiny bit more now, so that we don't have to go through anything similar to this process again in too short of a time frame. So I was glad you touched on that. I'm glad we have this flexible tool and Santec to really look at the scenarios. Marylson, I don't know what you think about that, but it seems to me that there's a cushion that we're a little bit, given especially the history of lack of collecting on funds and where we are now and then preparing for the future. I feel it should be higher, but of course I should only say that backed by numbers so that I can defend the logic.
Yeah, so I think the thing so here's the thing with financial planning. So the 10-year window is generally something we can get pretty good at predicting the future on. The 20-year window, a lot of stuff can change in the next decade that could completely affect the 20-year window. So we use the 20-year window to help us as an indicator long-term, but we try to dial in more in that 10-year window. And so as the 10-year window rolls from year to year, that's when we look at what might be coming into the future, and then we have a decade to plan for it. I think a good example of this is the stuff that we're doing at the wastewater plant relative to planning for Reg 31. Right now, our master planning is showing that we need to invest $150 million about 18 years from now.
Yeah,
if we can find a tech.
Yeah, it does make sense to plan more succinctly, more directly for the nearer future that you can control and not waste energy on things that have a high standard deviation of change. But still, there are forecasting models that can at least give us an eye, especially in this industry and in this particular field, that I think can protect the city a little bit farther out, or at least in some even small ways, where I'm thinking I absolutely don't want us to invest in a ton in it, but there is some to do, and I just want to make sure we are looking at it, Peter.
Yeah, I think we're exactly in line with what you're saying there. Is planning for the 10-year, but also considering the 20 years, so we don't end up, in some kind of a bind.
Exactly. Thanks, Peter. Sorry about that.
Sure. No, that's fine.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing here is that this has to be constantly looked at, in a significant way, more maybe in chunks of years, every year, of course, but at a 5-year point, at a 10-year point, at a 15-year, and that I think is what maybe we didn't do enough of in the past. So, I mean, you can plan for 20 years, but you got to be watching it all through that and say, hey, we're really off base here, which is what we were. And I can't quite, I mean, I know, John, you and I probably scratch our heads like, what did we do? Where did we miss this? I don't know, Chair Wiggins, what you think, but it seems like we missed something along the way, and we did not raise rates and do the things we needed to be doing over time. And that means constancy and not just, plan for something that's 20, 30 years and then leave it alone. It's got to have minding.
I wonder if there's a way that Peter can lock in certain planning for revisiting this and analysis every chunk of years moving into the future for when none of us are still here, so we can keep the city on the good and narrow.
Yeah, well, that's what we're trying to establish that as a methodology and get it so that, because I think you're right, Mayor Olson, that it's 5-year chunks is generally
Sure.
you can really get the 5-year dialed in, the 10 years generally dialed in, 15 and 20 is so that you're looking far enough in advance so you don't get behind the 8 ball. I don't know that from everything that I've been able to dig into this, I think you hit it on the nail on the head. It was more of a year-over-year planning process as opposed to that far-reaching, longer-term analysis that doesn't necessarily mean that anybody did anything wrong. It was just a different approach.
Yep, I think you're right.
You're right.
Hey, could I weigh in here? First, one question, Peter. Is that 63.45 on the survey comparison? Does that include the $12 or $15 infrastructure fee, or is
that includes a $15 version?
Okay, that's the $15 version.
Yep.
Yeah, I think this looks really good. I kind of agree with Member Wink here that we should consider raising changing that 4%, especially early on, and getting up a little higher a little sooner to try to build a little more earlier cash reserves. The other thought I had is if we're if we end up passing this and it goes into effect everything in January, that seems like quite a shock to suddenly have a new $15 for the fee payers to suddenly have a new $15 fee plus a 4+% increase on their water bill. I'm wondering if there's any way we can pull that $15 fee back and see if we can get that rolling a little bit earlier. Like if we could do that this fall, then we could start accumulating a little reserves and also not have it all hit the bills at the same time.
I can definitely look into that.
Okay, yeah, I'm just trying to think about what a shock that's good, especially people who have a fairly who are paying a fairly small amount to suddenly have a new, it's because that applies to every single fee payer. That $15, that's not it's not dependent on how much they use. So that's going to be quite a shock to some people who don't pay very much.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I think the one, and I'll talk to Maria Sabata about this, Director Sabata about this, is right now the timing to actually, I think the thing that we could potentially do is when we bring all this forward in the fall around budget time in October, is instead of leaving it to be effective January 1, you could maybe have it effective November 1 or something like that, to give it a couple months earlier. That'd probably be realistically maybe the soonest we could go sooner on it.
I guess I have a question about that. So I don't get how that helps at all, Member Anderson. I mean, just 2 months, they're going to pay extra. They're going to pay extra is what they're going to do. It's still the same amount.
Well, yeah, but the whole point of this process is to spread the increases out over a period of time. So there's, I don't know if it makes any big difference in terms of the bottom line of the thing, but to have it all hit people at the same time seems like kind of a shock, I guess, is what I'm getting. Is, how do we best communicate the need for these fees and fee increases to the customers? That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Well, communication is one thing, but figuring out how to actually not have it have a devastating impact to low income is really quite another thing. And I'm wondering if there's I don't know if others have added that much. That's not monthly though, right?
No, that is monthly. That's what
monthly.
It's 15
Okay.
monthly.
Okay. So
that would be 45. I mean, if you're paying $100 right now, suddenly your bill goes up 100 to 145, and plus you have another 4% on top of that. It's just,
yeah,
that's a lot for people to process. That's all I'm saying. I mean, I don't know that's going to make a huge difference, but I'm just trying to think of a way that we can, and maybe if we can have some some way of helping our a program to help low income fee payers, that might help as well. But
I see your point, Anderson. I think some graduated way for certain segments of the population, and Mayor Olson, I think you're also right that whatever we can do to supplement the absorption of these changes through our communication. They have to happen, and I think raising the rate a little bit more is just necessary based on where we are. It's just a reality we have to face. It's a difficult one, but it's necessary. So yeah, through programs, like you said, Member Anderson, there are ways to do it. I think we should just make sure we maximize it so that Pieter and his team don't get completely seen in a poor light by this absolutely necessary and good work. Yeah.
We're going to be the ones who take the blow on this.
Okay, then no problem. We're used to it.
Also,
but
wasn't there talk of going to monthly billing? When is the idea for that to possibly happen?
Well, that's actually, both of these items are actually, it's a great segue into the continuation of my presentation. I've got both, the monthly billing thing is something we're going to cover, and then the customer assistant. So I can answer those in just a second. Let me,
continue.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Said, please continue. I'll be quiet.
Okay. Just real quickly, this is another whole big piece of the big scope item of this is developing actual a rate system that will correspondingly generate the revenue that we need. And so because you have your base usage, and then you have your irrigation usage, and there's tiers and all those kinds of things that are based on gallons used and all those factors. And so what we're looking at is going away from a declining structure to an inclining structure, getting away from flat rate metering, and all of that goes into building the rates themselves and how they're charged. And then what we do is we test that new system across a typical user's bill. And so that's another piece that's actually in process here. As part of the cost of service analysis is the first piece of it. But you've keyed in on one of the issues, which is the quarterly billing. It makes it difficult to evaluate the peaking characteristics for the customer classes. So when they are using higher amounts, it smooths things out too much, so you can't understand what customers are doing month to month. And then really those characteristics are what drive the ultimate results and how we build that rate model or rate system. And so monthly billing cycles is something that we are recommending. It's a piece that we're it's a component of the new billing system that utility billing is evaluating right now. At the soonest possible time that we could go to monthly billing, I think this will help customers budget for these kinds of increases easier, because they'll see it on a month-to-month basis as opposed to that really big increase in their bill on a quarterly basis. I think the realistic timing is maybe by July 1 of next year. And I don't want to speak for Director Sabata on this, but I think the amount of time it takes to get the new billing system in place and then transition it all to monthly billing, it's likely second quarter of next year. But we would recommend that as part of all this change, we move to, again, what is more industry standard and go to monthly billing. We want to simplify the rate structure. We want to put in the capital fee. I think I've covered most of this. And so I want to get to customer assistance program. And I know this is something that has already been touched on, and we have looked at this. And our recommendation is that we would move forward with something like this. And so the focus would be to help ease the burden for low-income houses or low-income households. And this could be, I know there's been discussion about where can the general fund balance be utilized to help offset some of the need in the enterprise funds. And this could actually be one of those places where if there's a general fund program that's utility assistance that helps those low-income users with paying their utility bill, that's a way that you can actually accomplish both mitigating the issue for the households that are going to be affected most dramatically, while at the same time utilizing that unallocated fund balance in the general fund to help make that happen, so that it doesn't become an additional burden on the utility rates and fees as a whole. And so that's kind of the direction that we're looking at heading with this, based on feedback from the board and the council. We would make it something that had specific metrics that would qualify people for them. You don't make them forever. You make them things that are that require repeat eligibility, things like that. But you can see some of the types of caps, and we're gonna give this get this presentation out to all the board members. It's much like last month, where we were finishing the presentation just before the meeting. So some of the considerations are the eligibility requirements, how much we want to discount, what kind of assistance level we want to provide. Talked a little bit about the funding source. Administration is something that we actually need to understand, get a better handle on, because this could be one of those things that if we get enough of a program in place, it could require the equivalent of a half an FTE in billing or something like that to administer something like this. I know I used to work at Castle Rock Utility in Douglas County. There's an income assistance countywide agency that they run their water assistance program through, but it doesn't sound like Arapahoe County has a similar kind of agency. So it might be something that we have to bring in-house. And then of course, we have to continually monitor it. Some ideas on cap eligibility is, you can see 125% of poverty level is a metric that's often used. You adjust it by the size of the household. Other things that we can consider are senior citizen income, fixed income, things like that. The point of this chart is to show you that there's not explicitly anything that makes it prohibited, and you can see that it's also something that's widely used across the nation. Where it is specifically prohibited are the states in red. So we are in yellow, which means that we could potentially have a challenge associated with it, but it is not necessarily prohibited. So this is something that just gives us a landscape of where we're at from an income assistance perspective. Here's some examples. This is more for y'all if once the PowerPoint goes out, so you can see some examples of how they're done and how they're executed, some of the metrics. So it's not something we wouldn't be, we're not going to reinvent the wheel on this. There's a lot of examples of established programs that work really well that we would draw upon, and Stantec has connection to a lot of these programs to be able to help us develop one that works for us. And so that's the meat of everything I wanted to discuss tonight. The next steps are, we're going to incorporate feedback. We are going to present alternative rate structures at our next meeting. Explore the options for the assistance program. There's a public outreach program that we are working with Director Hargreaves on in terms of getting out more public information on this. And then we have a presentation report, and then ultimately the 2021 budget approval. And that is the extent of the information I have tonight. I know it was a lot of information, but I would love to hear the board and council's feedback.
Anybody wish to put Pieter on the spot?
I have a couple questions.
Go ahead.
I've noticed with Excel that they allow other people to donate money toward accounts that can't afford to pay the bill. What would hurt to have that available as a possibility? People in the city have a little extra money. We just monthly make a donation. It's something then we can use to deduct on our taxes later But it's certainly something where if you've got so many thousand households and you can get a percentage of them willing to give $5 or $10 extra a month, what kind of impact would that have on those families that can't afford it, just to have it available? I mean, if you don't ask, you don't get. I'd make it available. Just suggestion out there. My other question was, since I'm throwing it all at you, you're right, that $15 whack per month for somebody who's used to a $100 bill for 3 months and it going to 145. And I'm sure you've looked at it. I'm just looking at it from a perspective of maybe if you started it out as 5 months, 10 months at $5 more, then the next 5 or 10 months at $10 more, and then the next 5 or 10 months at the $15 more, so you can get it up to where you want it, but without it being so painful at once. It may be that you need the money right away. I don't know, but I'm just throwing that out there.
Thank you.
So just, may I respond to a couple of those?
Sure, go ahead, Peter.
So I think on the donation thing, I think it's a great idea. It's probably something that we could actually just make as a standard part of the bill, and you know, have the option to, you know, put a donation amount or something like that, that people have, especially if people are getting an auto withdrawal. If they have their donation amount, it really becomes more of a accounting
Yeah.
thing. And so that's really it's a great idea. We'll look into it. I think it's something that we should definitely consider. As far as phasing in the $15, really that's something that, you know, we can look at any of this. I mean, I think the thing is, if it makes more sense to do, I probably wouldn't recommend doing it over the course of 3 years, but if it was over the course of a number of months where it had an incremental increase, I think that's something that we could, you know, we could adjust the programmatic needs and be able to account for that and still probably be okay. So it really is how people want to how we want to go at it. I think that the only thing to consider in that is if we do that, then we're continuing to delay things like the pump station that failed earlier this year. And so it's always that balance.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody else have any questions of Peter?
John, I've got a couple. I'll just comment first on the rate increase. I think that for me, the key is whatever we're doing, announce it up front, even if we're phasing it in, because that is a substantial shock. But what I find less appealing is something where, you know, you increase the bill in November and then there's another unexpected increase in January. Just pull the Band-Aid off. I mean, so I'd like to know what it is up front, even if you give me time to plan for it, so to speak. You know, so whether or not we can afford to phase that in or not. I mean, the bigger issue is we have to communicate that we're making a fundamental shift in moving our fee levels from this to this, because whatever reason we have to, you know, explain. On the CAP program, I have kind of a thought, like adding the voluntary contribution makes perfect sense. I'm curious, and I don't know, maybe this is rhetorical, but to the extent there are other options for CAP programs, it doesn't strike me as my reaction is that it's not going to be a board issue, that becomes I'll say more or less political issue that council would need to evaluate. That this board might have some thoughts about it, but I wonder if it's within the board's consideration. To me, I think we have to do what's the right way to deal with the rate structure for the system as a whole, but then the idea, I mean, certainly we're not going to be in a position to comment on touching general funds or things like that. So I just throw that out there. I'm very curious, and I like the idea of exploring it. I feel like there's a difference between the basic rate structure how this board may weigh in versus how it would weigh in on the the CAP programs that go beyond voluntary contributions of those that choose to do it. Just a thought.
Makes good sense. Anybody else wishes to add to this? You have
Yeah,
anything?
I'd really like to hear from the rest of the board because council's going to want to be listening to this and any other future conversations to see what you all think.
Agreed.
I'm curious if we can let people know as soon as possible about the rate increase in their current bills. A little note at the bottom or somewhere in the bill saying, hey guys, heads up, this is what's going on. Here's why. Just to kind of, like John said, sort of rip the Band-Aid off, but also let people know, give them a heads up. This is what's happening at this time every month. It's more of a reminder. The bold font gets bigger because it sounds like this is inevitable for the long-term planning that needs to happen. So instead of just teetering around it, let's just let people know in big, bold letters, even though I doubt everyone will read their entire bill.
You're right there.
You could try.
That makes good sense. Thank you.
May I? Can council speak again? Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chuck. That idea scares me a little bit. As opposed to like a formal socialization or communication campaign, however small but formal. And I mean, I think including it in the bill might be one thing, but I'm almost a little concerned about the jarring and shocking effect of seeing it on the bill at the time when you're already looking at your payment, as opposed to something that comes through our communications department and then has the information shared in a different kind of order and gives sufficient space and opportunity to provide the pieces like that Pieter will include in almost every time he speaks and gives a presentation, so that's just my thought around it. I mean, I do think we should use the bill, but I'm a little scared about how that might feel for some citizens, seeing it there first or seeing it in bold letters. I don't know what, but of course that's just my point of view.
I don't mean to speak for Francisco, but I believe the point was supporting, we've got to get the word out. So I don't think there was any suggestion that the bill's the only way. It was an example. The key is let's let people know this is coming and the reasons behind it and plan for it. So yeah, I think.
Okay, thank you, John. Yeah, sorry for that misunderstanding then. Thank you, perfect.
Typically when we have changes like this, how have we communicated these changes to our customers, I guess, for lack of a better term?
Pieter?
I don't know that I have, so I haven't necessarily, with the exception of the sewer rate increases last year that occurred, I don't know that there was a formal outreach campaign like we are attempting to do on this. I would probably defer to anybody else who has history, that if they know of anything else. I'm not sure exactly what has been done in the past.
And this, John, the one that's jumping to mind are the massive sewer plant changes. I can't count years anymore, a decade ago, whatever. And I don't remember how we handled it then, but that may be for one place for us to look. Sorry.
Nick, do you remember anything? I can't remember anything that we added or gave out to the people to let them know that this change was coming about and an increase would be. Chuck, do you remember anything?
No, I really don't.
I think we can find that out pretty easy. That's actually probably pretty easy to figure out. And last year, exactly how we let people know with the other change too. I'm actually a little bit more worried about, I mean, we have a great communication department, so they'll find a number of ways to get this out to let people know. I think the big question is are we okay with the changes? You feel supportive of what's being presented here? Do you see any other graded way to get at it?
Maybe something like this over here.
I think that's what council's going to be interested in from your perspective. And then also, I mean, we'll communication, we'll figure it out with us.
Well, I think the board as a whole.
Hey, Caitlin, I think that you're muted. You're not muted, and so we're hearing everything.
Oh, sorry.
I think the board, Mayor, as you indicated, as I read them, that we think that Pieter's on the right trail here and going at it. And so I don't see any problem with going with it. Just let the public know we're going to do it.
And Linda, just to be more responsive to your question, I mean, I'm frustrated that we're in this situation. I wish I could offer a more historical perspective, or better yet, go back and change something that would keep it from happening. But other than wanting to explain it better, I think that you still can't help but notice that everything leaves us below the average. The citizens have been getting a great deal. We should have been saving for retirement a little sooner. And now we're going to be catching up, but we're still way, we're still offering very good rates. And, in a way we're fortunate it's not worse than this. So other than wanting to make it less painful as it comes in and wanting to explain it better, other than those two things, I think I appreciate all the analysis and work that's going into and showing us how this thing phases in, and it seems like the right thought's been put into place.
Very good, John. All right. Do you have anything else from your staff, Pieter?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in a little bit on the public outreach. So we did get together, I think it was 2 weeks ago, with communications and mapped out a number of strategic communication points that we're going to make along the way as that complement the board and council meetings. The other thing is this really the communication itself, the programmatic communication came with the Flow It Forward campaign. So this is all part of that Flow It Forward campaign. And if you remember the summer Englewood magazine, it had the full 2-page layout. That was really kicking off this whole concept. And so we're tying it back to that and getting more deliberate with saying things like, we need to invest in the water system, and we need to invest a lot in the water system, and here's why, and here's the reason. So I think as we talk to the board and council and get your comfort level that we're headed on the right path, then that helps us refine what the message to the public is. And again, it all ties back to that Flow It Forward campaign.
I was looking for my edition of that. I can't find it. I was going to throw it up here because the middle spread, the stapled insert or in the middle, gives a great layout of it too. So I don't know if you all saw it, but a lot of time went into that. So I think communicating is going to have to be iterative and different formats. I just think we need to be clear about what we're messaging and that we're feeling like this is the right thing to do. And I think, John, to your point of messaging that we've been lower and gotten a great deal for a long time. And yeah, it's like young kids who don't put money in retirement and then all of a sudden catches up to them. And it was a different way of looking at it. We did year to year for a long time in the city and prided ourselves in being the lowest. Well, that works for so long.
All right.
How many citizens appreciate that we have a $500 million water value? That number is just stunning when you see it on paper, if I remember quoting it correctly. Did I get that right?
581 million. It is an impressive system.
And so when you realize it goes into how valuable this is, people don't realize that, that might be just one little tidbit. I'm sorry, go back one in time. Did we do, a question may be, did we have to get voter approval for a bond issuance for the sewer, the sewer plant, significant overhaul, you know, again, a decade or so ago? I don't know if anyone would know, but it seems, again, if we did, if we did, that means we got the voter approval. Maybe we didn't have to get voter approval, but either way, we were having to campaign around that and either get explicit support or implicit support. So there may be, again, just some lessons for us back then.
Yeah, typically for enterprise funds like this, you do not need to get voter approval. They're not GO bonds or revenue bonds, and so they're based on the rate revenue and the actually, because the utility actually has a revenue source.
So I think we faced some of these same issues back at that time then. So the same boat we're in now. So for whatever that's worth, it doesn't change where we're at.
I had one more question if I could jump in here.
Go ahead.
Pieter, the $15 infrastructure fee, and maybe you explained this some and I missed it. Is that restricted into certain kinds of expenses? I'm just thinking about how we communicate that particular fee to people.
We wouldn't necessarily put a restriction on it, but we would ensure that it ties directly to that investment in the predominantly the water infrastructure. Well, it is the water infrastructure, and so we have the capital needs for the water infrastructure. So what we can do is we can look at that revenue amount and ensure that that revenue amount is funding capital infrastructure, because in reality it'll fund a portion of that capital infrastructure, but the rates themselves will continue to fund an amount of that capital infrastructure as well. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend, you know, restricting it, but I don't know, that's typically not what we would do.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I just think around, you know, community. So that one's specifically for water infrastructure. None of that's going to go back to the sewer enterprise fund.
Yeah, the $15 for the water. The sewer is actually in fairly decent shape.
Right. Well, yeah, I think people are generally aware that that our infrastructure needs some help, and I think most people are going to go, okay, $15 a month. We got to take care of the system we got. If we can communicate that clearly. And I think you've got it right on calling it an infrastructure fee. That helps people get their minds around what it's for. But that piece of communication, I know you guys have discussed this, is going to be key to the people getting their minds around why we're doing this. So I appreciate that. Oh, it looks like Mayor Olson has the spread there.
Trying to hold it up without having it disappear in my background. It's actually in we've got this edition, that's why I couldn't find it. It's the COVID edition, and it's actually not in the centerfold either. It's a few pages in, like page 8, which is a really nice overview, and there are a number of things in it that I think there was a kind of a heads up to here it is. I got a number of emails about it, so I know people read it, but that doesn't mean everybody read it.
You're right.
I don't know what our readership is on the Citizen right now. It changed once we went to the magazine. Used to be 85% of citizens read it.
Yeah, I think the part of that spread that was really good was in the lower right-hand corner. It showed the bill comparison, and I think that really started to show people, it was like, well, wait a minute, we're way behind.
Yeah, well, if you look at it, you all have it. It was a nicely done piece. You all did a great job on it.
Right. All right. Don, did you have something?
Not really.
Okay. Well, does anybody else have anything else they would like to add to this meeting?
I do. As far as rolling this out and everything, have we put into place like at least a general plan on how we're going to handle making these increases and how it relates to people who are struggling because of essentially the recession because of COVID? Has that been built in? Did I miss that?
I think that's the assistance program. And so if someone is experiencing financial hardship, then we would have this assistance program in place to, so if they've been out of work or something like that and they're having trouble paying their bills, and then they can show that they don't have the income, then that would be what that program is designed to do.
That answer you, Caitlin? Okay, thank you. Well, if nobody else has anything else, I would just like to ask our Secretary Jay if she could possibly get out a Sewer and Water Board member book sheet of paper as to people's names, address, and phone numbers. So each member would have it in the event they wish to contact other members on the board, as was previously done by Lorraine. Can you do that, Jay?
Absolutely. I will get it out as soon as possible.
Whenever, it's not a big rush. Just if you could do that, I'd appreciate it very much.
All right.
All right, if nobody has anything else they wish to add, I thank you for your attendance at the meeting, and we will call this meeting adjourned. Thank you very much. Put your mask back on and wash your hands.
Please
Thank you, everybody.
Get the schools back in the fall.
Okay. Thank you.